Okay, so this is where we left off in the second lesson. What is a valid block hash in Bitcoin? In Bitcoin, a valid block hash is like a special code that miners try to find. It's a unique number that helps keep track of each block in the blockchain that stores information about transactions. The blocks connect in a chain from the first one, the Genesis block, to the latest, making a public record of all transactions. This block hash is crucial because it links each block to the one before it, making it easy for anyone to check the history of transactions. So if we have a look over here at mempool.space, which you guys are familiar with by now, you'll see if we go to any of these blocks, we can see it's got a unique block hash. And as we know now, a hash is like a unique fingerprint. So this block hash is unique to this block of transactions. And each block needs to include the block hash of the block before it. And this ensures the secure chain of transactions that's tamper-proof or tamper-evident. If anybody tries to change any single transaction or anything about any of the data in any of these blocks, it'll obviously completely change the resultant hash and therefore invalidate the block. Okay, so it's crucial because it links each block to the one before it, making it easy for anyone to check the history of transactions. It's like a fingerprint for each block, ensuring the information is correct and secure. The block hash acts as a way to confirm that the data in the block hasn't been changed. So again, remember, a hash is a fixed length digest, so regardless of the input into the hash function, the output is always a fixed length. The blocks are linked together by enforcing a specific relationship between blocks. That is, a block must contain a fingerprint, which is a hash value of the data of the previous block. A hash function can condense arbitrary messages, the block information, to a fixed size, example 160 bits, and produces a fingerprint of the message. So here you can see block 2 has a hash of block 1 in its header, and block 3 has a hash of block 2 and all the way through. Then we come to the race to mine a block. What are we talking about when we're talking about mining? Miners engage in a competition to uncover the block hash that aligns with the target. It's a special number set by the network. The miner who's the first to successfully discover the correct block hash is granted the opportunity to add that block to the blockchain and assign it with the corresponding hash ID. This solution serves as validation for the block's authenticity. Mining can be compared to a race where the goal is to reach the finish line as quickly as possible. How difficult it is to find the block hash is adjusted periodically, ensuring that each block continues to be mined in approximately 10 minutes as miners join and leave. This mechanism is called the difficulty adjustment. And remember, we talked about that in the last lesson when we discussed exactly that problem Daniel asked. So again, in that example, in that question, we use the analogy of a haystack. The more people searching through the haystack, the more hay gets added to the pile. So that consistently the needle is only found once every 10 minutes on average. So let's say the target number set by the Bitcoin network is 1,000. the miners would have to use their computational power and energy to search for a block hash, a specific number that is lower than 1,000. The first miner to find a block hash lower than 1,000 gets to add the new block to the blockchain and is rewarded with Bitcoin. The difficulty level in Bitcoin mining is a measure of how difficult it is to find a valid block hash that meets the targets set by the network. It is adjusted every 2016 blocks, or roughly every 2 weeks, to ensure that blocks are added to the blockchain at a consistent rate. The difficulty level is expressed as a number, and the higher the difficulty level, the more difficult it is to find a valid block hash. For example, let's consider two different hashes. Hash 1, we have these 4 zeros and then a string of random letters and numbers. We'll call this difficulty level 1. Hash 2, we can see, has 9 zeros and then a string of random letters and numbers. We'll call this difficulty 2. In this example, hash 2 has a higher difficulty level than hash 1 because it is a longer hash with more zeros at the beginning. It would be harder for miners to find hash 2 because their computers would need to do more work. So remember when we played around with the hash, the SHA-256 hash example, and we hashed the different pieces of text? We ended up with a random hash digest that looked very similar to this. Now imagine how many variations one would have to go through before you ended up with a hash with a leading string of zeros like this. By finding a valid block hash, a miner demonstrates that they have done the work required to add the new block to the blockchain and are paid a reward in Bitcoin plus transaction fees for their effort. Proof of work is the method the Bitcoin network uses to validate transactions and add new blocks to the blockchain. Proof of work keeps Bitcoin safe by making it difficult for anyone with malicious intentions to take control. In summary, the task of miners consists of 1. Bundling transactions into blocks. While nodes verify newly created transactions that are waiting in a mempool, miners select a subset of these to include in the candidate block. 2. Proof of work. Miners race with each other to find the valid block hash. Broadcast valid blocks. After finding the valid block hash, they propagate the new block to the network. And 3. Earn rewards. Lastly, they receive newly created Bitcoin and transaction fees for successfully adding the block to the blockchain. 4. And here we can look again at mempool.space. And we can see some of those things that were just discussed. If we look at any of these blocks here, we can see the unique hash, and you can see all those leading zeros, right? So let me copy that. I'll post this to the group chat, and you can see just how many leading zeros there are in this hash. Now, if the blocks are coming in, and we can have a look here at time chain count, and we can see the average block times here are coming in quite fast, right? 8 minutes and 47 seconds, and when our target is 10 minutes. Now, this is still very early in the new difficulty epoch, so that's likely to adjust closer to 10 minutes as we find more blocks. But were it to remain like this, let's say that the hash rate remained high for the rest of this difficulty epoch, and blocks kept coming in faster than they should, then the difficulty would be adjusted so that the hash would require more zeros. So it would be more difficult for the miners to discover a valid block hash. hope that makes sense. If you guys are confused by any of this, please shout up. Happy to address any questions. We've got a fair amount of time this last lesson. I think we'll finish up a little bit early if you guys don't have questions. So I'm happy to stop and address any. Okay, so let's see what else we can see that they were talking about here. So bundling transactions into blocks. Here we can see in this block, we can see the actual block, all of these transactions that were bundled into the block that the miner, and the miner in this instance was Foundry USA. They found the valid block hash. They won the right to choose which transactions were included in this next block and got added the block to the blockchain. And in turn, they also received fees, right? And the subsidy, which you can see at today's prices equates to well over $300,000. Not too bad. Let's have a look at this infographic we've got over here and see what all it's illustrating. Here we have the memory pool. This is the pool of unconfirmed transactions. You can see all the various users wanting to send their Bitcoin. They broadcast the transactions to the network. The transactions sit in the memory pool until a miner finds a valid block hash, at which point he'll choose usually the highest paying transactions and include those in the next block. And that block will also include the block hash of the previous block. You see here block 48, it's got the block hash which is included in the next candidate block. And the same, that's got the previous block, and so they are chained together, right? The blockchain. Multiple miners can work on creating new blocks simultaneously. The first miner to discover a block hash that meets the target set by the network announces it to the network, and the other miners then check the transactions in that miner's candidate block to make sure they are valid. If the transactions are indeed valid, the block is added to the blockchain. The other blocks created by the other miners at the time are not added and are discarded. This process helps maintain consensus within the network and prevents double spending. And remember, consensus is agreement, right? Maintains agreement as to the state of the network and the ledger. A candidate block is a set of transactions considered for addition to the blockchain but has not been added yet. And again, we've got an infographic. Let's have a look. The miners, the nodes working to maintain and update the ledger, gather all the latest transaction data. They group it all together in a block to add to the chain. So these are all the candidate blocks. Each miner can have their own unique candidate block. It's up to them which transactions they wish to include. Then they calculate a hash for the block. They run all the data through an algorithm or function that spits out a unique string. Then they do it again and again and again. They're looking for a valid hash, one that begins with a long string of zeros. The first miner to find one wins newly created Bitcoin, and their Bitcoin is added, and their block is added to the chain. This hash assures no one tampers with a ledger, changing a single number or letter anywhere in the chain will make every hash for every subsequent block unrecognizably different, at which point other nodes will reject the compromised ledger. Okay, the mempool, what is it? The mempool or memory pool is like a waiting room for transactions in the Bitcoin network. When you make a transaction, it is first broadcast to the mempool before it is verified, selected, and added to the blockchain. Imagine you are waiting in a line at a restaurant. Your name is added to a list of people waiting for a table. When a table becomes available, the host calls your name and seats you. Similarly, a Bitcoin transaction is added to the mempool when it is made and is confirmed and added to the blockchain when a miner includes it in a block. And if I can have a quick look here, I can show you guys quite a nifty visualizer of that. Oh, that's a shame. It looks like they're busy rebuilding it. Okay, we'll just carry on with the slides. A mempool is where transactions wait to be confirmed in a block. When a node first receives a transaction from a peer, it has to verify the transaction is legitimate. Nobody wants faulty or deceptive transactions. The main purpose of a mempool is to relay unconfirmed transactions and provide miners transactions to mine. So when you and I each run a node, our nodes will share transactions with each other that aren't already in one another's mempool, and this happens all throughout the network. So that provides miners transactions to mine. Mempool synchronization allows nodes to share their transactions with other nodes by sending a message containing a list of verified transactions in the mempool. So here again, you can see miner number 1 and number 2. They have a different set of transactions in their mempool, but they exchange data so that they end up with a very similar list of transactions in their mempools. So every node has its own memory pool. Access to memory pool, ATMP, involves checking things like, do I already have this transaction? Is there a conflict with a different transaction in the mempool? Did the Bitcoin in cover the Bitcoin out? Do the signatures prove the previous outputs can be spent? And are there enough fees? How are transactions verified and added to the mempool? When new transactions are broadcast to the Bitcoin network, nodes verify those transactions to make sure they are valid and that the funds have not been spent before. Once these transactions are verified, the nodes will add them to their mempool. The nodes will then share the transactions with other nodes to double check. Finally, if the majority of nodes agree, the transactions will be made available to select and be included in a block. However, there are several reasons why a transaction might not be confirmed after 72 hours. 1. Low transaction fees. Transactions with a low fee may not be processed quickly enough, as miners are more likely to choose transactions with higher fees to include in their blocks. 2. Network congestion. If the network is congested, there may be a delay in confirming transactions even if they have a high fee. 3. Double spend attempts. If a malicious actor attempts to double spend, their transaction may be rejected by the network. 4. Incorrect or incomplete data. If a transaction contains incorrect or incomplete data, it may be rejected by the network. 5. Malformed transaction. If a transaction is malformed, it may be rejected by the network. To avoid having transactions rejected, it is recommended to include a fee that is high enough to ensure the transaction is processed in a timely manner and to double check that all the data in the transaction is correct before sending it. And so, of course, here we are, again, always referring to on-chain transactions specifically. And coming back here to mempool.space, we can have a look at the current fee rates. We can see about 10 sats per virtual byte, which equates to about $1.31. I can't remember what we paid for the test transaction in the first lesson. Let's try and pull that transaction up again here quickly. And revisit it. So you remember last time we looked at it, I think it had about 130 confirmations. And here we can see we've got almost 1,200 confirmations at the points. Remember, we were included in block heights 870 and 20. And you can see the fee rate we paid back then. It wasn't far off what it is today. But you can also see that the fee rates have fluctuated up and down a fair amount since then. So it's always a good idea, if you want to save a few sats, to just have a look at what the fee rates are like, not just in the last block, but in the last 6 or 60 blocks, depending on how urgent your transaction. But if I go back here, I can see that there were transactions clearing as low as 6 sats, 4 sats per virtual byte, 5 sats, 3 sats per virtual byte. So I know then, if I'm patient, if I don't need my transaction to be in the next block and I can wait a few hours or 24 hours, then I can pay a somewhat lower fee. Even in this, what is arguably a high fee environment, you can still transact relatively cheaply if you have a low time preference. And hopefully you guys remember that from probably chapter 2 or 3. Okay, so we have an activity here, the mempool activities. Scan the QR code or go to mempool.space in your browser. Review the various elements displayed on the page, including the latest blocks, confirm transactions, the number of transactions, memory usage, and approximate value of the entire block. We can come back here to mempool.space and go through the latest blocks. I think we did already do this in the first lesson, but we'll recap it anyway. So you can actually, in mempool.space, you can switch these around. And personally, I prefer, so this is just an aesthetic thing. I prefer that the blocks that are found on this side, because I feel like this is the correct way. By default, it'll be this way. But regardless of which way you're viewing it, the ones with the block numbers are obviously the blocks that have been found. These are all transactions that are sitting in the mempool, waiting to be included. So over here we have the unconfirmed transactions, and over here we have the blockchain, all of the latest transactions, all the way back to the very first transaction, the Genesis block. Then if we look at each individual block here from the top down, we've got the block number, the block height at the top. We've got the average fee rate. This block was 9 sats per virtual byte on average. The lowest fee that was paid was 9 sats. The highest fee was 151 sats per virtual byte. The total amount of Bitcoin that was sent in this block was 0.102 Bitcoin, which was a total of 5,117 individual transactions. And that block was found exactly 11 minutes ago by Foundry USA. Over here we've got the estimated fee rates to get into the next block, 12 sats per virtual byte. You'll see the current average fee rate for this block, the next block, is 11 sats per virtual byte. So 12 sats per virtual byte will get you straight to the front of the queue. And then if your transaction is less urgent, you can pay a bit lower. Go ahead, Roberto. You got a question?
Okay, let me see if I'm understanding this. If you confirm a transaction, you earn the fee.
If you what?
If you confirm an individual transaction, you, as a miner, earn the fee. You got the fee for you.
If you find the block hash, if you find the valid block hash. So the miner, if you're a miner, you will go and you will take all of the transactions, usually the most high paying fee transactions that are waiting to be cleared. So if we have a look here, you see a block was just found. So what happened here was F2 pool took transactions that were here pending in the mempool. So everybody who's waiting to have their transactions confirmed, they took a selection of those transactions and they put them in what's called a candidate block. So they make a block, they say, this is all the transactions I'd like to add to the blockchain. And then they also put a hash of the previous block along with that. And then they hash all of that. And what they're looking for is a valid block hash, right? So when they hash that, what they're hoping to find is a block hash with a lot of leading zeros. If they don't, they hash it again by changing some of the data. They change something called a nonce, a number used once. And they can sometimes also, they'll change some of the other arbitrary data, and they'll hash it again, and they'll hash it again, and they'll hash it again. And everybody who's mining is in a race to find a valid block hash, which is a hash that has enough leading zeros to be considered valid, that demonstrates that they've done the work of looking for that needle in that haystack, right? So when some lucky miner finds a valid block hash, they then have their candidate block added to the blockchain, and they are rewarded the block subsidy plus all of the transaction fees for every transaction in that block. Does that answer your question, Roberto?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And then you can see if you've got no priority, in other words, you don't mind that it takes a while for your transaction to arrive. The estimate is 4 sats per virtual byte. But like I said, if you're looking at it yourself, you'd see you probably could sneak a transaction in at 3 sats if you're really patient. Then over here, we can see the difficulty adjustment. And we can also switch over here to the halving if we want. This is the time until the next halving, at which point the subsidy will be cut in half to 1.563 Bitcoin. And we have the difficulty adjustment, which you'll see the estimates at the moment is upward adjustments of 8.56%. because the blocks are coming in too fast. So if nothing changes in the next 10 days, then we can expect mining to become a lot more difficult, so that the average block times are brought back down to 10 minutes on average. But as I say, we're very early into the new difficulty epoch. So if we go back and have a look at time chain calendar again, you'll see this orange circle is the blocks till the next halving. So you can see we've got quite a way to go into the next halving, and then the next circle in here is the blocks to the next difficulty adjustment. And you can see there's still a long way. We're just barely into the new difficulty epoch. And so we haven't really, it hasn't been long enough to have a very accurate estimate of what the difficulty adjustments will be in 10 days' time. See what else there is on mempool, right? So here we have basically mempool spaces, theoretical candidate block. This is what they would expect a candidate block to look like based on the fees people are paying. Here you can see the amount of incoming transactions. Oh, I'm sorry about that. There you go. So this is typically what a candidate block might look like. These are the transactions that would be potentially included in the next block. And then here we've just got a graph illustrating the incoming transactions, how many unconfirmed transactions are pending. And then a table of some recent transactions. If we go into one of the blocks themselves, by just clicking on it, we can see again the block hash. We can see exactly what time it was discovered. We can see how much data was included. We can see this fee span, what the average fee rate was, what the total fees were earned for that miner, plus the subsidy, and which miner mined the block and which transactions they included. And then we can go and we can see every single transaction, obviously, that's in that block. It's all transparent. And we can see it contained 5,927 transactions, and you can go and look at your individual transaction. You can also use mempool.space to, and this is what I was hoping to do on the first lesson, except that our block was found literally seconds after I broadcast the transaction. But if you have a pending transaction, let's say you're making a withdrawal from their exchange and you're waiting and you're worried, waiting for your Bitcoin to arrive to your blue wallet or green wallet, wherever you might be withdrawing it to, you can take the transaction ID from the exchange or from whoever's sending you the Bitcoin, and you can just plug it in here at mempool.space and search for it. And you'll see where in the mempool it's sitting. If they've paid too low a fee, you'll see it back here, and you'll see it move forward as transactions clear. You'll be able to see the state of your transaction.